When my daughter Melanie told me I'd have to stay in the attic during her in law's visit because there wasn't enough room in my own house, I should have known something was wrong. When I heard the key turn in the lock from the outside, I knew exactly what kind of daughter I'd raised. But when I heard her tell Gloria and Richard that her mother had passed away last year, I realized she'd already buried me in her mind. She just forgot I was still breathing. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. Now let's get back to the story. My name is Ellen, and I'm 71 years old. For the past 2 years, I've been sharing my house with my daughter Melanie, her husband Dan, and their son Jacob. I say Sharon, but really I gave them my home after my husband Paul died. I thought it would be nice to have family close by. I thought it would help with the loneliness. I was wrong about a lot of things. The house is a 3-story Victorian that Paul and I bought when Melanie was 5. We spent 30 years restoring it room by room, painting every wall ourselves, refinishing the hardwood floors on our hands and knees. It was our life's work, our legacy. When Paul died of cancer 3 years ago, I couldn't bear the thought of selling it. So when Melanie suggested they move in to help take care of me, it seemed like the perfect solution. She and Dan were struggling with their mortgage, and I was rattling around in a house meant for a family. Jacob was in his senior year of high school then, and I loved the idea of being close to my grandson during his last year at home. What I didn't realize was that Melanie had already decided I didn't fit into the life she wanted to build. It started small. She'd rearranged the living room furniture while I was at the grocery store moving my favorite reading chair to face the wall. "It looks better this way, Mom," she'd say when I asked about it. "More modern." Then she started hosting dinner parties without telling me. I'd come downstairs to find strangers in my dining room, eating off my china. "Oh, Mom," Melanie would say with that bright fake smile she'd perfected, "these are some friends from Dan's work. Why don't you go rest? You look tired." I wasn't tired, I was being erased. The worst part was how Dan went along with it. He'd been a sweet boy when Melanie first brought him home from college 25 years ago. Quiet, thoughtful, the kind of young man who always helped clear the table without being asked. But somewhere along the way, he'd learned to look past me like I was furniture. "It's just easier, Ellen," he'd say, when I asked why I wasn't included in family decisions anymore. You know how Melanie gets when she's stressed. Yes, I knew how Melanie got. She'd been that way since childhood, charming and manipulative, able to convince anyone that her version of events was the only reasonable one. As a little girl, she could talk her way out of any punishment by making me feel guilty for even considering discipline. As an adult, she'd perfected the art of making her bad behavior seem like everyone else's fault. The attic incident happened on a Friday in March. Dan's parents, Gloria and Richard, were coming for the weekend. They lived in Connecticut and only visited twice a year, but when they did, Melanie transformed into someone I barely recognized. She cleaned the house obsessively, cooked elaborate meals, and spoke in a voice that was 2 octaves higher than normal. "They're very particular," she explained to me on Thursday evening as she polished the silver. "Gloria, especially. She notices everything. I'd met Gloria and Richard exactly 3 times in 25 years. They were wealthy, conservative, and had never quite approved of their son marrying someone from a working class family. The fact that Paul had been a high school principal and I'd been a school librarian didn't matter to them. We weren't country club people. "I'm sure they'll be lovely," I said diplomatically. Melanie stopped polishing and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mom, about this weekend, I've been thinking." "Oh?" "The guest room is going to be occupied, obviously, and the downstairs is going to be pretty busy with entertaining and meals. I was thinking maybe you'd be more comfortable upstairs." Upstairs meant the 3rd floor, which was mostly storage space and one small room that had been Jacob's playroom when he was little. It was dusty and cramped with slanted ceilings and poor ventilation. "I don't mind staying in my own room," I said. "Well, that's the thing," Melanie said, not meeting my eyes. "Dan's parents might need that room if they want to nap or have some privacy. You know how it is when you get older. Sometimes you need to lie down in the middle of the day." Gloria and Richard were in their 70s, the same age as me, but I didn't point that out. Where exactly would I stay upstairs? I asked. The attic room. I've already started setting it up for you. It'll be cozy, like camping. I'd slept in that room exactly once, when Jacob was a toddler and had a stomach bug that kept the whole house awake. It was hot in summer, cold in winter, and smelled like mothballs. But Melanie was looking at me with that expectant expression that meant arguing would only make things worse. All right, I said, if you think that's best. I do, she said, relief flooding her voice. It's just for 2 nights, and Mom. Maybe it would be better if you stayed up there during the day, too, just while they're here. Gloria can be judgmental about certain things. What kinds of things? Oh, older people. She thinks they should be in communities with people their own age. The words hit me like a slap. I see. It's nothing personal, Melanie said quickly. She's just old-fashioned that way. But I could see the truth in her eyes. She was embarrassed by me. Her elderly mother didn't fit the image she wanted to project to her in-laws. I was evidence that she came from ordinary people, that she hadn't always lived in a perfectly restored Victorian with expensive furniture and fresh flowers in every room. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Melanie spent the morning in a frenzy of last-minute preparations, rearranging flowers and wiping down surfaces that were already spotless. At noon, she appeared at my bedroom door with a tray. Time to get settled upstairs, Mom, she said brightly. I packed you some sandwiches and a thermos of coffee. There are books up there, too. The tray held 2 peanut butter sandwiches, an apple, and a thermos that looked like it hadn't been used since Jacob's Boy Scout camping trips. She'd also included a stack of romance novels from the used bookstore, not the kinds of books I'd ever chosen to read, but apparently the kinds of books she thought elderly women enjoyed. I followed her up the narrow stairs to the 3rd floor. The attic room was exactly as uncomfortable as I'd remembered. She'd brought up an old twin bed from the basement and covered it with sheets that smelled like storage. A small lamp sat on a cardboard box that served as a nightstand. There, Melanie said, setting the tray on the box. All set. I'll come get you when they leave on Sunday. She started toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Mom, it's probably better if you don't come downstairs at all while they're here, just to avoid any awkwardness. Before I could respond, she was gone. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of a key turning in the lock. She'd locked me in. I sat on the narrow bed and stared at the door. My own daughter had locked me in the attic of my own house, like I was a shameful secret, like I was something to be hidden away. I could hear activity downstairs, car doors slamming, voices in the driveway, Melanie's bright greeting. Gloria! Richard! So wonderful to see you! For the next hour, I listened to the sounds of welcome and reunion drifting up through the old house. Laughter, clinking glasses, the clink of good china being set on the dining room table. My dining room table, in my house, while I sat locked in an attic eating stale peanut butter sandwiches. That evening, the voices grew louder as they moved to the living room after dinner. I could hear snippets of conversation through the old heating vents that connected all the floors. The house is absolutely beautiful, Gloria was saying. You've done such wonderful work with it. Thank you, Melanie replied. It's been a labor of love. Dan and I put our hearts into every room. Our hearts, not mine and Paul's hearts after 30 years of restoration work. Not my heart, living with the grief of missing my husband in every corner of the house we'd built together. And how is Dan's mother? Richard asked. I remember she was quite elderly. Oh, Melanie said, and I heard the slight pause that meant she was choosing her words carefully. Actually, she passed away last year. It was very peaceful. The breath left my lungs. She told them I was dead. I sat in the dark attic, listening to my daughter tell her in-laws about my fictional death. How I'd lived a full life and gone peacefully in my sleep. How the family was still adjusting, but finding comfort in this beautiful home, she left us. She left us. As if I'd willed them the house instead of letting them move into it, because I was lonely and foolish enough to think family meant something. I'm sorry for your loss, Gloria murmured. Thank you, Melanie said. She was a wonderful woman, very quiet, Very private. I think she would have loved meeting you. Very quiet. Very private. The perfect description of someone who could be locked in an attic without anyone missing her. I pulled the thin blanket up to my chin and closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I lay there thinking about all the ways I'd failed as a mother, all the times I'd given in to Melanie's demands instead of teaching her that other people's feelings mattered, all the excuses I'd made for her selfishness, telling myself she was just ambitious, just particular, just trying to build a good life. But you can't build a good life on lies, and you can't love someone by pretending they don't exist. Saturday was longer than Friday. The voices downstairs were more relaxed now, punctuated by genuine laughter. They went out for lunch at some expensive restaurant in town, leaving me alone in the locked attic for 4 hours. When they returned, I heard them giving Gloria and Richard a tour of the house. This was originally the master bedroom, Melanie explained as they passed by on the second floor, but we converted it into a library so much more elegant. My bedroom, the room I'd shared with Paul for 30 years, where I'd nursed him through his final illness, where I still kept his reading glasses on the nightstand because I couldn't bear to put them away. Now it was so much more elegant. They paused outside the attic door, and for a moment I thought they might come in. But then Dan's voice, "Just storage up here, nothing interesting." Nothing interesting. That's what I'd become. Sunday arrived finally. I'd finished the romance novels and eaten the stale sandwiches. When Gloria and Richard left, Melanie unlocked the attic door 20 minutes later. "How are you doing, Mom?" she asked cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. Later, when I confronted them about the eviction, Dan protested, "Family doesn't treat family this way." "You're right," I said. "Family doesn't lock mothers in attics or tell people they're dead." "That was a misunderstanding," Melanie said quickly. "What would you call being imprisoned in my own house and erased from conversation? You weren't imprisoned. You were staying upstairs for privacy. Whose privacy, mine or yours?" "Mrs. Liang is my tenant now," I said calmly. "You have 60 days to find your own place." "You're actually evicting us." Dan's voice cracked. "I'm choosing who I want to live with, someone who doesn't hide me like a shameful secret." The next few days were tense, but Mrs. Leong remained unbothered, going about her routine peacefully. It was the most peace I'd felt in 2 years. Wednesday evening, Melanie tried to negotiate. "We could all live here together. Would you stop treating me like an embarrassment? Stop hiding my belongings?" "I never treated you like an embarrassment. You told your in-laws I was dead. That was easier than explaining. Explaining that you have a living mother?" She couldn't answer. Jacob called Friday, supporting my decision completely. "Mom broke up the family when she decided to treat you like garbage," he told me. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." Mrs. Liang smiled when I shared this. "Your grandson sounds lovely. Children often turn out better than their parents." The next week passed quietly. Melanie and Dan were clearly making arrangements to move, though they didn't discuss their plans with me. They spoke to Mrs. Liang politely but distantly, and they treated me with the careful courtesy of people who were afraid of making things worse. It was the most peaceful week I'd had in 2 years. Mrs. Liang and I fell into an easy routine. We had coffee together in the mornings, shared dinner 3 or 4 evenings a week, and spent quiet time reading in the garden or watching old movies. She was interested in my stories about the house's restoration, and I was fascinated by her tales of teaching high school literature for 30 years. "You know," she said one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner, "I feel like I won the lottery finding this place. It's not just the house, though it's beautiful. It's the company. I've been lonely since my husband died." "When did you lose him?" 5 years ago. Cancer. We had 42 good years together. Paul and I had 38. The grief is complicated. Yes, people expect you to move on after a certain point. But grief isn't something you get over. It's something you learn to carry. Exactly, and it's easier to carry when you're not carrying it alone. Much easier. Friday afternoon, Jacob arrived for his visit. I heard his car in the driveway and went to meet him. He was taller than I remembered, though it had only been 3 months since Christmas. College was maturing him in good ways. Grandma! He swept me into a huge hug. You look great. Really great. I feel great. Come in, I want you to meet Mrs. Liang. I introduced them in the living room. Jacob was charming and respectful, asking about her background and her interests. Mrs. Liang was clearly delighted by him. Your grandmother has told me so much about you, she said. She's very proud. She's pretty amazing herself, Jacob said, grinning at me. I heard she's been making some big changes around here. Indeed, she has. Very positive changes. Where are Mom and Dad? Jacob asked. Packing, I said. They're moving out next week. Good. It's about time. That evening, Melanie and Dan joined us for dinner. The atmosphere was strained, but civil. Mrs. Leon made an effort to include everyone in conversation, and Jacob worked hard to keep things pleasant. So where are you guys moving? Jacob asked his parents. We found a nice place in Riverside, Melanie said. Smaller, but it'll be fine for now. For now? Until we can afford something bigger, this whole situation has been expensive. I didn't point out that they'd been living rent-free in a house worth $500,000 for 2 years. Some lessons people have to learn for themselves. After dinner, Jacob helped me with dishes while Mrs. Liang and his parents watched a movie in the living room. So, he said, drawing a plate, are you happy with this arrangement? Very happy, Mrs. Liang is wonderful company. She treats me like a person instead of like a piece of furniture. Good, you deserve that. You deserve better than what Mom was giving you. Your mother isn't a bad person, Jacob. She's just lost sight of some important things. She locked you in an attic, Grandma. That's not losing sight of something. That's cruel. Yes, it was, but I don't want you to hate her. She's still your mother. I don't hate her, but I don't respect her right now. There's a difference. I understand that. Will you be okay here by yourself? I mean, with Mrs. Liang? I'll be better than okay. For the first time in 2 years, I'll be home. Sunday morning, Melanie and Dan loaded the last of their belongings into a rental truck. I stood on the front porch with Mrs. Liang and Jacob, watching them prepare to leave. Melanie came over to say goodbye. She looked tired and older than her 43 years. Mom, I hope you'll reconsider. Once we're settled, maybe we could try again, do things differently. Maybe, I said, though I didn't mean it. Take care of yourself, Melanie. I love you, she said. And for the first time in months, she sounded like she meant it. I love you too. Dan shook my hand awkwardly. Thank you for everything, Ellen. I'm sorry things worked out this way. I'm not, I said. This is how things should have worked out 2 years ago. They drove away without looking back. Jacob was staying until Monday morning, so the three of us spent the rest of the day quietly enjoying the house. We cooked together, played Scrabble, and sat in the garden watching the sunset. This feels right, Jacob said as we were getting ready for bed. The house feels peaceful again. It does, I agreed. It feels like home. Are you going to change anything? Redecorate or anything? I'm going to put my reading chair back where it belongs, I said, and I'm going to unpack all the things your mother boxed up. Other than that, I think the house is perfect the way it is. Good. I was worried you might want to erase all trace of us living here. Not us, sweetheart. You're always welcome here. This is your home too, whenever you want it to be. Thanks, Grandma. That means everything to me. Monday morning, Jacob left for school with promises to visit again soon. Mrs. Liang and I waved goodbye from the front porch, then went inside to start our new life together. Over the next few weeks, I slowly reclaimed my house. I moved my reading chair back to its place by the window. I unpacked my books and put them back on the shelves. I retrieved my photo albums from the garage and displayed them prominently on the coffee table. Mrs. Liang helped with some of the heavier work, and she had excellent suggestions for rearranging furniture to make the space work better for both of us. She had a natural eye for design and a respect for the house's history that Melanie had never shown. This house wants to be lived in, she said one afternoon, as we were hanging pictures in the hallway. Not just occupied, but truly lived in, with love and laughter and good conversation. That's exactly what Paul used to say. He sounds like he was a wise man. He was. I think he would have liked you very much. I hope so. I would have liked to meet him. In a way you have. This house is full of him. Every room, every restored detail. He's still here. I can feel that. It's one of the reasons this place is so special. 1 month after Melanie and Dan moved out, I received a letter from my daughter. It was short and carefully worded. Dear Mom, I hope you and Mrs. Liang are settling in well together. Dan and I are adjusting to our new place. It's smaller than we're used to, but we're managing. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I want you to know that I'm sorry. I realize now that I wasn't treating you the way you deserved to be treated. I was so focused on managing everything and everyone that I forgot to consider your feelings. I hope someday we can rebuild our relationship. I miss you more than I expected. Love, Melanie. I read the letter twice, then filed it away in my desk drawer. It was a start, perhaps, but words were easy. Change was hard. 2 months later, Jacob brought his girlfriend home for a weekend visit. Sarah was a lovely girl, smart and funny, and clearly crazy about my grandson. Mrs. Liang and I enjoyed having young people in the house, again, filling it with energy and laughter. This is exactly how I pictured your family home, Sarah told me as we were making breakfast Sunday morning, warm and welcoming and full of love. It took me a while to get it back to this state, I said. But yes, this is how it's supposed to be. Jacob talks about you all the time. You're obviously very important to him. He's important to me too. He's the light of my life. He told me about what happened with his parents. I'm sorry you went through that. I'm not sorry anymore. It led me to this, which is much better. Mrs. Liang seems wonderful. She is. She's become like a sister to me. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born with. That evening, as Jacob and Sarah were getting ready to drive back to school, Jacob pulled me aside. Grandma, I have something to tell you. Oh? I'm thinking about changing my major from engineering to social work. What brought that on? Watching what you went through, learning about elder abuse and family exploitation. I want to help people like you, people who need someone Todd at her for a long moment. It was fine, I said. Great, they loved the house. Gloria couldn't stop talking about how tasteful everything was. I'm glad. You can come down now. I'm sure you're ready to stretch your legs. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting after 2 days on the terrible mattress. Melanie, I said as she started down the stairs, what did you tell them about me? She paused, her hand on the banister. What do you mean? I heard you talking Friday night. You told them I was dead. A flush spread across her cheeks. You must have misheard. I didn't mishear anything. Mom, you were probably half asleep. Sometimes when we're tired, we imagine things. There it was, the gaslighting that had started when she was 5 years old and perfected over decades. Make Ellen doubt her own perceptions. Make Ellen question her own memory. Make Ellen think she was the problem. I know what I heard, I said quietly. Well, even if I did say something like that, it was just easier. You know how Gloria is about older people. I was trying to avoid an uncomfortable situation. For whom? For everyone, Mom. For you too. You wouldn't have enjoyed their company anyway. They're not really your type of people. She was probably right about that, but that wasn't the point. I followed her downstairs to the living room, where Dan was reading the newspaper in Paul's old chair. He looked up when we entered, but didn't meet my eyes. Welcome back to civilization, he said, with forced joviality. Hope you got some good reading done. Yes, I said. Very enlightening. I spent the rest of Sunday quietly, moving through my house like a ghost, which I supposed was what I'd already become. The living room had been rearranged again, my reading chair was now facing the wall, and my knitting basket had been moved to a corner where it was barely visible. In the kitchen, my favorite coffee mug was missing from its usual spot in the cabinet. That evening, I went to my room early and found that my dresser had been gone through. Nothing was missing, but everything was slightly out of place. My jewelry box had been moved. My photo albums were stacked differently. Someone had been looking through my things while I was locked away. Monday morning, I started going through the house more systematically. Many of my books were gone from the living room shelves, not the valuable ones, but the ones that looked dated or cluttered. My collection of antique teacups had been packed away in boxes in the garage. Several small pieces of furniture that Paul and I had refinished together were nowhere to be found. I'd been disappearing piece by piece, and I'd been too polite to notice. That afternoon, while Melanie was at work and Dan was traveling for business, I drove to the town records office. I needed to see something, to confirm a suspicion that had been growing in my mind. The clerk, a young woman with purple hair and kind eyes, helped me pull the property records for my address. We spread the documents out on a table under fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh and official. This is interesting, she said, scanning the paperwork. The house is still in your name, Ellen Morrison. There's never been a transfer of ownership. Even though my daughter and her family have been living there, doesn't matter. You can let anyone live in your house, family, friends, tenants, but unless you've signed a deed transfer or put them on the title, it's still legally yours. I sat back in the plastic chair, absorbing this information. In all the chaos of Paul's death and the family moving in, I'd somehow assumed that ownership had transferred too, but it hadn't. The house was still mine, all mine. Is there anything you need me to look up? The clerk asked. No, I said. Thank you. You've been very helpful. I drove home slowly thinking. For 2 years, I'd been acting like a guest in my own house. I'd been grateful for permission to live in rooms I'd painted with my own hands. I'd been apologetic about taking up space in a house my husband and I had paid for with 30 years of work, but I wasn't a guest. I was the owner. That evening, I called Jacob at college. He was a sophomore at State University studying engineering, and he called me every Sunday without fail. He was the only member of the family who still treated me like a person instead of an inconvenience. Hi, Grandma, he said when he picked up. How are you? You sound tired. I'm all right, sweetheart. How are your classes? Good, busy. I'm thinking about coming home for a long weekend soon. I miss you. I miss you too. Jacob, can I ask you something? Of course. When you were home for Christmas, did you notice anything different about the house? There was a pause. Different how? With your mother, with how she treats me. Another pause, longer this time. Grandma, are you okay? Did something happen? I told him about the attic. Not everything. I didn't want to burden him with the full extent of his mother's cruelty. But enough. She locked you in the attic? His voice was incredulous. While Grandpa Dan's parents were there? She said there wasn't enough room. That's insane. It's your house. Well, technically, no, not technically, actually, it's your house. You let us live there. Mom acts like she owns it, but she doesn't, right? Right. Grandma, that's not okay. What Mom did isn't okay. You know that, right? Hearing him say it so plainly with such clarity and conviction made something inside me crack open. I know. What are you going to do about it? I don't know yet. Whatever you decide, I support you. Mom's been different since Dad died. Meaner. I see how she treats you, and it makes me sick. After I hung up, I sat in my bedroom, the room that was now a library, and thought about what Jacob had said. Melanie had been different since Paul died, but maybe she'd always been this way, and Paul had been a buffer between us. Maybe his kindness had masked her cruelty, or maybe grief had stripped away all her pretenses and shown me who she really was. Tuesday morning, I drove to the library where I'd worked for 25 years before retiring. The new librarian, a earnest young man named David, was happy to let me use one of the computers to research something. I spent 2 hours looking up information about property rights, tenant law, and elder abuse. What I learned was both empowering and disturbing. As the legal owner of the house, I had rights I'd never exercised. I could ask anyone to leave at any time. I could change the locks. I could sell the property without consulting anyone. I also learned that what Melanie had done, isolating me, controlling my living situation, taking my belongings without permission, qualified as elder abuse under state law. But I wasn't interested in filing charges or having my daughter arrested. I just wanted my life back. That afternoon, I went for a walk through the neighborhood where I'd lived for 40 years. The houses were all well maintained, the gardens just starting to show spring growth. It was a peaceful place, the kind of neighborhood where people knew each other's names and borrowed cups of sugar. On Oak Street, 2 blocks from my house, I saw a "For Rent" sign in front of a small cottage. The house was tiny but charming, with window boxes and a bright red door. I wrote down the phone number, but as I was walking back home, I saw someone I recognized sitting on a bench in the small park at the end of my street. It was Mrs. Liang, who had been one of my favorite patrons at the library. She was in her mid-60s, a retired teacher who had moved to town a few years ago to be closer to her daughter. Mrs. Liang, I called out. How lovely to see you. She looked up and smiled. Ellen, how are you, dear? I was just enjoying this beautiful weather. I sat down beside her on the bench. Are you well? How is your daughter? Oh, she's fine. Busy with her own family, you know how it is. Actually, I'm looking for a new place to live. The apartment I'm in is being sold, and I need to find something by the end of the month. That must be stressful. A little. I'm not getting any younger, and moving is such a chore, but I'll figure something out. I always do. We talked for another 20 minutes about books and gardening and mutual friends from the library. Mrs. Liang was everything I remembered: intelligent, kind, thoughtful, the kind of person who listened when you spoke and remembered details about your life. When I got home, Melanie was in the kitchen making dinner. She looked up when I came in, scanning my face like she was checking for signs of trouble. How was your walk? She asked. Lovely. I ran into Mrs. Liang from the library. She's looking for a new place to live. Oh, Melanie turned back to the stove. That's nice. Yes, it is. She's such a pleasant woman, very respectful. I emphasized the word respectful just slightly, enough to make Melanie glance at me again. Mom, about last weekend. I hope you understand why I made the arrangements I did. It wasn't personal. Of course not, I said. It was practical. Exactly. Sometimes we have to make practical decisions. Yes, I said. We do. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mrs. Liang, sitting alone on that bench, worrying about finding a place to live. And I thought about myself, sitting alone in an attic, being told that I was dead. Both of us displaced. Both of us treated as inconveniences by people who should have cared about us. But I had something Mrs. Liang didn't have. I had a house, a big, beautiful house with more rooms than I could use, and I had an idea. Wednesday morning, I called Mrs. Liang. I hope you don't mind me calling, I said, but I've been thinking about your housing situation. Not at all, dear. Any suggestions would be welcome. Would you be interested in coming for tea this afternoon? I have a proposition that might interest both of us. She arrived at 3 o'clock, carrying a bouquet of daffodils from her garden. I served tea in the dining room, using my good china, the china that Melanie had been serving her dinner party guests without asking. This house is beautiful, Mrs. Liang said, looking around at the restored woodwork and period details. But you and your husband did such lovely work. Thank you. It was our life's project. And now you share it with your daughter's family? Yes, though I'm finding that arrangement less satisfactory than I'd hoped. I told her about the attic incident, though I softened some of the details. Mrs. Liang listened with growing concern. That's terrible, Ellen. No one should be treated that way, especially in their own home. No, they shouldn't, which brings me to my proposition. Mrs. Liang, how would you feel about becoming my tenant? Your tenant? This house has 5 bedrooms. I only use one. There's a lovely suite on the second floor with its own sitting area and bathroom. You could have privacy and independence, but we could share meals when we wanted company. The rent would be very reasonable. Mrs. Liang set down her teacup carefully. Ellen, that's incredibly generous. But what about your daughter? Wouldn't this cause problems for your family? My family has been causing problems for me, I said. It's time I started solving them. We talked for another hour about practical arrangements. Mrs. Liang was interested, very interested, but worried about causing family conflict. My daughter has been treating me like an unwanted guest in my own home, I told her. I think it's time she remembered who actually owns it. Are you sure about this? Once you take this step, there's no going back. I'm sure, I said, and I was. For the first time in 2 years, I was completely sure about something. That evening, I called Robert Chen, my longtime lawyer. When I explained the situation, my daughter's family living in my house and wanting to establish a formal tenancy with someone else, he was direct. It's your house, Ellen. You can rent to anyone you choose. Give them 60 days' notice to vacate. What if they refuse? Then you evict them. But Ellen, are you sure about this? Family situations can get messy. Robert, my daughter locked me in the attic and told her in-laws I was dead. After a long silence, he said quietly, I'll have the documents ready by Friday. Friday morning, I signed everything, Mrs. Liang's lease, Melanie and Dan's eviction notice, and an updated will leaving the house to Jacob. Saturday morning, as Mrs. Liang's movers arrived, Melanie appeared in her workout clothes. I'm expecting company, I said. Mrs. Liang is moving in as my tenant. Melanie's face went white. You can't just get a tenant without discussing it with us. I can. It's my house. Where are we supposed to go? Somewhere else. You have 60 days. When Dan came home from golf to find strangers moving furniture upstairs, he demanded an explanation. Mrs. Liang is my new tenant, I said simply. You have 60 days to find other arrangements. That's not reasonable, he protested. You moved in here in 2 weeks when it was convenient. Why can't you move out in 60 days? That evening, they cornered me in the kitchen. This won't work, Melanie said. We're family. Family doesn't lock mothers in attics, I replied. Mrs. Liang pays rent and treats me with respect. You have 60 days. We'll get a lawyer, Dan threatened. The house is in my name. The papers are filed. Mrs. Liang has a signed lease. They moved out 3 weeks later. I watched from my porch as they loaded their car, Melanie's face twisted with resentment, Dan avoiding my eyes.